everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings, the card game by Fantasy Flight Games. And I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride.
And today, for episode 35, we have a very special episode. Today we are pleased to have with us Samuel Shreeve, who is the author of the White Tower blog. You'll know him probably in the Facebook group because recently he has been doing a playthrough and a narrative to go with that playthrough called Agents of the White Council. So, Samuel, I'm so glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm glad to be here with all y'all today. Well, as you said, I run the White Tower blog. I've got two blog series running at it, if you will. The first is, like you said, Agents of the White Council. It's a narrative campaign where we're going through every single quest in the game, minus the Saga expansions, and writing up a narrative and treating it as if it were like a Saga campaign, only going through the regular quests. The other one is a series called Experimental Deck Building, where I just take whatever wild or crazy deck building idea I have and just write up a blog post about how I'm building these decks, and then go out and test them against random quests.
That's really cool. Let's talk a little bit about the Agents of the White Council, because that, to me, is a really interesting idea. From what I've gathered from the 4 episodes that you have out, I think you've gone through Hunt for Gollum, and you're in the process of doing Carrick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you follow the travels of Eleanor, right? Like,
yeah.
This is Eleanor, because when I was watching the Dol Guldur episode, you said, I reserve the right to not capture Eleanor because your narrative is following her, and you wouldn't want to capture her in that scenario. Why Eleanor?
Yeah. Part because I felt she was kind of an underrated hero in the community. She's one that has a really useful effect, but it's not flashy. It doesn't lend to power decks. And for a long time, she was panned as really just kind of a useless hero outside of really niche cases. And I thought, well, I think I want to try to explore that. Also because she was a Fantasy Flight created hero, and it's a lot easier to tell stories about heroes that don't have 3,000 pages of history of the Tolkien lore.
That's true. And if you get any pushback, you can say, well, I did it myself, so
exactly.
It's fine. You don't want to deal with Glorfindel, right?
Right. I kind of wanted to open up narrative freedom, if you will.
Yeah, and I think in that series, I was trying to figure out how Lanwin plays the role. What role Lanwin is doing. I read and I watched all the playthroughs and stuff, which is another aspect of your series that I love. But what role does Lanwin play? I see in the written narrative part of it.
At the moment, what I'm kind of trying to do is having Eleanor as kind of the experienced adventurer. And Lanwin is almost the Frodo, if you will. The person who's never been on an adventure before, who's outside of her home for the very first time, but she's being mentored by an older, experienced person. She kind of got caught up in things outside of her control. And then at some point she was like, I have the option to go back home, but I don't want to. I've seen enough that I need to be a part of whatever it is you're doing out here.
Right. And did you pick Lanwin for the same sort of reason?
Really, yeah.
Well, that's good.
All 3 of them were picked mostly for the reason they were Fantasy Flight created, and none of them are power heroes. So it's like opportunities to explore new decks that don't necessarily play off the things you expect them to.
Right. And one of the things that I love about your series is that with each narrative, you have a playthrough that you play, highlighting Eleanor's deck, and then a second player deck that you use. And does that feed the narrative, or is the narrative kind of separate, or like what's the? I mean, I think I know what the answer. I think I know what the answer is, but I still want to ask a question for our viewers who aren't familiar with your work, because it's what you do is really neat. So can you explain the link between the video and the narrative?
Sure. Yeah. The narrative follows the video. Like, I'll do a video playthrough, and then once I published it, the narrative I'm going to do is based on that playthrough. Not necessarily exactly one-to-one. For the Hunt to Golem, I
embellished,
dressed a few turns because that one got long, and it was starting to get tedious to try to write and follow the action for the few turns. So I compressed a few turns to make the narrative flow better, but I tried to stay true to the playthrough there.
Well, we could sit around and talk about you personally all day, I guess, but I think that we should probably get to talking about the card. We gave Samuel the opportunity to pick any card in the card pool that we have yet to address. And so, Samuel, what card did you pick?
Well, I chose Tactics Theoden. He is a 12-threat hero with the Rohan Noble and Warrior traits. He has 2 willpower, 3 attack, 2 defense, and 4 hit points. He is a Sentinel hero, and his ability reads, each hero with a printed tactics resource icon gets +1 willpower.
So, Grant, what do you think of... Well, I guess, Samuel, what do you think? We'll start with you, right? Forget you, Grant. You haven't said anything yet. Might as well start now.
That's fine. I'm just along for the ride, man. I'm enjoying it.
So, I like Theoden. I really like the tactics version of him. Most of the time, when he came out, he was a little bit thematically disappointing. He doesn't have anything to do with the Rohan trait, and all of the Rohan tactics heroes are willpower poor, or were at the time. And so there wasn't a natural pairing up with him, and it sort of felt like for the King of Rohan, we wanted something a little more splashy, if you will. Right. A little more flashy. Flashy is the word I'm looking for.
Right.
A little more flashy. And he wasn't it, but he's started to grow on me, particularly since I started trying him out with his sword Herugrim, which adds his willpower to the attack value. And that attachment alone suddenly makes him a more versatile hero, an option that makes a bigger impact and can be built around in an interesting way.
His sword really changes his how versatile he can be, and it changes really what he can do in a deck. Grant, what do you think of Tactics Theoden?
I liked them. I mean, I don't sit and try and build a thematic deck. I go with heroes that I like the look of. If I'm running a tactics, I may not run monosphere tactics or anything, but if I've made a couple of decks with Tactics Theoden in, just for the pure fact of getting that extra 1 or 2 extra willpower out of them for at least 1 or 2 turns. Then hide Golden Shield on him and he can become your defender. And then you just smash, as you say, with an Unexpected Courage or Snowmane, you can then quest, attack and defend. With Herugrim, he's an absolute monster.
Yeah, and Tactics Theoden, I think, is a card that really can be slotted into a lot of decks, and the fact that his attributes are so well rounded, I think also really leads into some interesting deck combinations. Now, Samuel, I don't know if you know or not, but I'm a real low threat sort of starting player. I like my hobbits and things like that. So that 12 threat to start with really gets me nervous. But for what Theoden is, I actually really like Theoden, especially in a monotactics deck.
I would say he shines at his best in a monotactics deck, but I've enjoyed playing him in a deck with just 2 tactics heroes and a spirit hero.
Who are those heroes that you used him with?
The other tactics hero was Éowyn, of course.
Éowyn, right? Well, when you said other tactics and other spirit, then it's, did you use both copies of Éowyn?
I mean, it was tempting, but no. The spirit hero was Baragon, actually, to help with the threat.
Right. And defense, right?
Yes, absolutely.
When you have tactics Theoden with Hergrim, he can really defend, or he can really attack a whole bunch of things out there, and then his horse really helps him as well. Like, it's just he's got a couple of toys that make him really really worthwhile to put into a deck.
I would say he's probably dependent on those toys, though. He's not a hero you can just throw into any deck and he's gonna do just fine. If you're not building to build him up, he ends up probably being a little more expensive than the value you're getting out of him.
I think that you can you don't have to put his toys on him. You could put a lot of different toys on him, and
sure.
Or I guess a lot of different cards you could put. I'll steal Grant's line. Grant's always loves to talk about the Dunedain marks and signals and, doing all those things. So, you could do that. How you get to the leadership sphere with Theoden can be a little tricky, though. So, do you run him with Aemir? And then you have, or Theodred, his son? I don't know. You don't know how you get to the leadership sphere. But, and I think, isn't his sword a leadership card, too?
His sword is a spirit card.
It's a spirit card, okay.
What's a spirit card?
Is there okay, this is where we have a little sidebar here. Isn't there
Guthwin is a leadership.
Guthwin, that's what I'm thinking of. And that's a Rohan, right? Attached to a Rohan.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's the one that allows you to attack immediately.
That's the one that lets you. It adds +2 attack, and then you can, if you kill an enemy, you can pull a Rohan ally from the discard pile to your hand.
That's it. So that's the one you use with Spirit Theoden.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely, right. A lot of times we get these heroes that are released that are just have very niche uses. Not that they're not awesome, but they seem to go into just very specific decks. And I don't think that you necessarily have to take Tactics Theoden and build around him per se. Yeah, it would be great to add a couple of cards to him, in the deck for him. But if you have 2 or preferably 3 Tactics heroes, I think that you can slot Tactics Theoden into that deck and not really lose anything.
I can definitely see that, especially as we've gotten more Tactics heroes recently that want to quest, like Éowyn and Hirgon.
Yeah, and I always think of those battle and siege quests back in the Heirs of Numenor or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I'm super weird when it comes to these quests because I don't read the cards and I don't look at them, so I don't build decks to defeat certain quests, which is the reason why I've never beaten Dol Guldur, Escape from Dol Guldur, and why your video about how to escape from Dol Guldur was amazing to me because you made it look so easy for the Agents of the White Council. I was like, oh my goodness. Nonetheless. But when you pull out a surprise siege stage or a surprise battle stage, Theoden is so well-rounded that you can just use him. Like, okay, he's an all-around kind of great guy, similar to Aragorn. Actually, his stat lines are almost exactly the same as Aragorn, except for the 1 less hit point.
Yeah.
What are you thinking, Grant?
I'm just contemplating what other decks I would have used them in, and I think he shows more worth when you're playing multiplayer than he does in solo when you're running when they've got more tactics heroes out. Because obviously it's willpower to them, because not each hero you control with a printed tactics resource icon. It's just all heroes with a tactics resource icon. And I've seen me use them. I generally play a 2-player, and I've generally played them once or twice in a 2-player game where I've had 3 or 4 heroes with the tactic, and it just can get insane willpower out there.
Yeah, and I think that exactly what you said is right. He gets more powerful and more powerful the more players you have. So, it's right now a friend of mine and I are running through the campaign. We just what did we just do? We beat Helm's Deep, and then we beat the one afterwards. Oh, Isengard. Yeah, we just destroyed Isengard in the campaign. And so, but he's got Tactics Theoden as one of his heroes, and I have Mary. And so my willpower boost from him just helps make Mary a better hero. So, if you're playing alone, Tactics Theoden may not be the way to go. If you're looking for a global effect to help the rest of your cards. So what are some other combos that we think of when we think of Tactics Theoden? Like, in terms of the card itself, I think it's set up to be a general. Like, it's always good to put Unexpected Courage on them, those sorts of things. But what are some other cards we run that we put on Tactics Theoden?
Like I said before, I've run them with Golden Shield, Snowman, and Pilgrim to give them access to a massive amount of defense and decent attack. Because when Snowman's equipped, although it's restricted, it's not restricted for Theoden, so you can actually have up to 3 restricted attachments on them.
One thing I've done is, in some of my decks, I've chosen to not include his sword. Instead, I fill up his restricted slots with the Golden Shield and the Leadership mount Armored Destrier.
The Armored Destrier.
Allowing him, it fills up his other restricted slot, but that means he's questing, readying with Snowmane, blocking for at least 5, then readying with the Destrier, discarding a shadow card from another enemy, and either blocking that one or attacking back.
Yeah. How do you generally get access? Because the Armored Destrier is a leadership card, right?
I'll often run it with Elfhelm.
Okay.
The hero with Elfhelm, who gives the boost for the mount attachments.
All the mount attachments, right? So we're talking about Rohan and mounts and, Snowmane, the Armored Destrier. I'm sure the Rohan Warhorse goes really well onto these guys. So, but do you have a thematic issue with being able to equip a hero or any character with 2 horses?
I actually don't. I know a lot of people have said, oh, how can you ride 2 horses at the same time? What's going on? I see it more as we're abstracting, like, the game's abstracted anyways. If you look at the flow of combat, it's not like, oh, I whacked at him once and now he's whacking back at me with his attack. It's more an ebb and flow of a combat situation spread out over some indeterminate amount of time. So I see it more as you've brought along a couple horses and you're switching through your horses as one gets tired.
Right.
Which is a thing that ancient cavalry warriors did. You bring a couple horses because if one of them gets tired or hurt in a battle, you don't want that to be your only mount.
Right. And so is there going to be a reflection of this philosophy in Agents of the White Council at some point?
At some point, yes. I don't know if you've gone through any of the video playthroughs that are in advance of the narrative there, but for the Hills of Emyn I actually put together an Elfhelm deck.
There it is, a mount deck.
As the companion deck to the Eleanor Lanwin Thalen thing.
Right. Oh, that'll be. I can't wait to see how you. I didn't get a chance to see that particular video. I did watch all the ones. I have been keeping up with the ones that go through the narrative as you write it. Mm-hmm. So I'll read the narrative and then I'll watch you play it.
Okay.
And so, I don't
At the moment, the videos are a couple scenarios in advance of the narrative. The narrative is trying to play catch up.
Right. Well, it's hard. It's hard to sit down and do that. But
one of these things, writing or doing the video, is a little more difficult than the other.
Right. Right. Grant, I don't know if we've ever talked about this on the show. What do you think about the two mount thematic issue?
I think we did actually discuss it when we came across Citadel Plate.
Probably.
Citadel Plate, and how some people said you cannot put 2 Citadel Plates on Gimli. You can only wear one. The same with the Boots of Erebor. When we did that. Now, generally speaking, when I'm playing a game, I don't generally think about it. But when I'm sitting down constructing a deck or looking back at it afterwards, after I've played, it's like, I really shouldn't have done that. You can't do that. But generally speaking, while I'm playing the game, I'm not bothered. As long as I'm having fun and playing the quest and doing it right, it's matterless.
Yeah.
As long as I'm not breaking any rules,
right,
it's all good.
Well, I'm a big rule guy. You're less of a rule guy than I am, Grant. Like you'll take out those fellowship attachments and stuff and use those in your deck, and I'm bigger rules than you are, or at least that's we've played a couple of times on OCTGN, so yeah. I always I
only pull out the fellowship cards in Saga campaign cards when I'm not when I'm only playing for fun.
Yeah.
If I'm playing for the sake, when I'm playing and I want to do something, I generally don't break those sorts of rules.
Right. Yeah. I guess the last thing that I'll talk about in terms of Theoden is that I just really like that this card is a tactics card. He's well-rounded, and I mean thematically it goes, and his art is really, I think, representative of who I envision to be Theoden. Mounted riding, like doing those things. But the fact that he's tactics is also thematic, and then I think that gives him easy access to all the things that boost somebody like Theoden in my own head. If he were a lore hero, I don't necessarily think of Theoden as that lore guy. I think of him as a battler and always defending his keep. And he's always in the midst of war, right? My favorite line in the whole trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, is when the beacons of Amandin get lit, and they're like, and Rohan will answer. I just always imagine that's, and so in that case, I do love that Theoden is a tactics hero, and I think that where Fantasy Flight ends up putting the cards, I think also has a big impact on how we view that character, right? Do you see that? I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that the tactics sphere is the perfect home for this version of Theoden. This is the warrior Theoden. This is the one that's charging down at the Pelennor fields, or the one who in his youth was going off on campaign. This is the Theoden in his most epic moment, and I think the card reflects that, and tactics is a perfect fit for that.
Yeah, and he can get into a lot of those things that make him really good. Like you guys have talked about the Golden Shield and things like that, but what about Spear of the Mark and all of those Rohan attachments like that? Spear of the Mark makes him done here. You can attack into the staging area plus get a benefit. The fact that he gives an extra 1 willpower kind of really reflects him being the king and the leader of the Rohan people.
Whenever I think of Theoden, I think of the let this be the hour when we draw swords together. Fell deeds awake. Now for wrath, now for ruin, and the red dawn. Forth they all in us. And he just rides out the Helm's Deep, charging down the Uruks. And it's like that final stand where you put everything on the line. That's what I think Theoden represents for the tactics sphere. You just put it out. Because his ability lends so much to like the questing rather than the attacking side. So I think that's where they've drawn the willpower boost from. But it's all in all, he's a brilliant character, and in all honesty, I think he would fit into 3 of the 4 spheres. I think he could also do quite well as a leadership hero.
He could. I think that leadership is kind of a natural place to put him.
Obviously, he first came out in the Morgul Vale expansion is with the tactics, and then later on they brought him out as the spirit hero. But I think, in all honesty, I would have probably done tactics, then leadership, and then at another point maybe put him as a spirit hero because of the fact of what he represents. He's a leader, he's a warrior. So do you want to ring him then, David?
Yeah, let's ring this guy. Samuel, you feel like ringing this guy?
Sure. I think on the scale where 1 is the most epic card to be ever printed, which I think you so far have given to Sam Gamgee, and there was one other.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I'm impressed you even knew that one. Sam Gamgee, and of course everybody's favorite core set event that's leadership, costs 1.
Sneak attack.
Sneak attack. Right. Yes.
Where 1 is the best card to be ever printed, and 10 is this isn't even worth putting in my bike spokes to make a cool sound with it. I would put tactics there and squarely at a 4, I think.
4. For what reasons?
I love him a lot, and he's really powerful if you build around him, but at the end of the day, he's not in the topmost tiers of heroes. Maybe a 3.5. Can I revise for 3?
Oh, 3.5. Oh, Grant, he must have listened to your episode where you gave half ratings or whatever. Oh.
I know 3 seems too good, and 4 seems like not giving him enough credit. So 3.5 is very ridiculous.
David, what you giving him?
Oh man, I'm gonna stick with the 4. I love that he is versatile. I love his stat line. I love his effect, but his threat is high enough that I'm not going to build a deck around him much, and so I use him. And my buddy uses him, like I said, in the campaign, and I love what he does multiplayer. And I think that if we were talking about, multiplayer card talk, his rating would go up. But I have to stick to a 4 just because I don't, for the way that I play, I think that I don't build around him, although I feel like his versatility is really good and really clutch in a lot of ways. How about you, Grant? What do you think?
I'm also going to give him a 4, but I enjoy playing with him, and he's a hero that, with more tactics heroes that you're playing with, or with more friends that are playing with tactics, he gets better. He's like Dane with the dwarves. He gets better with the more dwarves you have.
Nobody's like Dane with the dwarves. Okay, let's make that clear.
But, he's definitely a hero I've played, and I will play with more in the future when I get I have more people to play with, and it's just going to be one of those ones where he's a good hero. I've used him, but he's not top tier. He's mid tier for me.
Yeah, I think so. So it seems like we all kind of agree here. This is a first here for Card Talk with guest hosts here. We have, you know, for the people we've had on, it seems like there's always somebody who usually doesn't like the card that we talk about, which is usually me. I will squarely take the blame for that. But you know, but then it seems like we all kind of agree that he's a pretty good guy. So Samuel Shreeve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
And everybody out there, when you get a chance, look up the White Tower blog, and especially my favorite is his Agents of the White Tower series. It's phenomenal. So have a great day, everybody.